cut your onions, shallots, garlic.
Garlic, right?
Garlic, yeah. For about, let it sit, cut them, kind of work on your recipe, do whatever you're doing, and let it sit for about 15 minutes or so. Then that allicin, ALICIN, by the way, is created. And that too is a big cancer fighter.
All right, Switchies, welcome to the show. It's just me because Alexandra and I just spent about 30 minutes trying to figure out what's going on with your computer because we can't hear her. And we were unsuccessful. So sadly, it's just me today, but we've both been so excited about having Dr. Jim Lewis and Caryn Dugan of the Doc and Chef show on YouTube on, and that's who's here today. So we have this incredible duo, and they are revolutionizing the world of plant-based focused nutrition. Dr. Loomis and Chef Caryn Dugan educate us all by connecting the dots between nutrition science and its real world application through their YouTube show, The Doc and Chef, which I know some of you have seen because some of you have written and we've had some convos. So they have these really concise videos that are set up to quickly break down complex concepts into easily digestible terms. And then Caryn turns that knowledge into delicious, practical meals, which I really appreciate because I'm a practical girl. I like to spend only about 15 minutes. It's 20 is pushing it in the kitchen to make dinner. So she is your gal if you are like me. So I wanted to mention too that Caryn is also known as the St. Louis Veg Girl. She's really a culinary powerhouse and the founder of the Center for Plant-Based Living. And her delicious recipes and passion for teaching make healthy cooking accessible and so enjoyable. Caryn's journey, fueled by her personal battle with cancer, has turned her into a beacon of wellness and vitality. And Dr. Loomis, Jim, is the medical director at the Center for Plant-Based Living at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which so many of you know. He's a physician and a specialist in lifestyle medicine, and his work has inspired countless individuals, to adopt healthier living habits. He was in the Game Changers. He was also on episode 25, way back when, of the Switch for Good podcast, where we discussed diet, inflammation, and a lot about microbiome. So go back and check that one out. And I'm very proud to call him a friend, a dear friend, and an ally. So we're excited to have them on the show, or I'm excited because Alexandra's not here. They're going to share their insights and experiences and hopefully some fantastic tips for anyone looking to make changes to their diet. So welcome to the show, you two from Fort Lauderdale, right?
That's right.
Right. Although, yes, I'm in Washington, D.C., and Caryn lives in St. Louis, obviously. But we are here working at a health immersion to help spread the word.
The good word on plants.
No, it's amazing. You're with our friend, Dr. Scott Stoll. And Jim, I think that you are speaking at our first day of Plantrition Conference, Adapt.
I am.
Yes.
And I'm also speaking at Plantrition. I'm speaking at the Plantrition conference as well.
So you're going to do it a bit with us on the Adapt Day. So some of our listeners know, but maybe not all, the Plantrition conference is in Anaheim, California this year. It's in September. So you can go to Plantrition. It might be .org, but it might be .com, but y'all will find it and sign up for that incredible conference. But pre-Plantrition, we're going to do a full day on integrative sports nutrition, and Dr. Loomis is going to speak, and I am, and Dr. Stoll and a few others, and we're just going to have an awesome day for elite level athletes, but also for just everyday athletes, which is what I am now, and Dr. Loomis, right? We're just wanting to feel great and move our bodies, and so we're going to do a whole day on that. So sign up if you get a chance.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the people that benefit from Adapt are anyone that wants to perform at their highest level, whether it be an elite athlete, whether it's someone, a weekend warrior or corporate executive. I mean, anybody who wants to perform optimally would benefit from coming to this, to that conference for sure.
Right. It doesn't just have to be physical because we're going to talk a lot about the mind at that. So awesome. So we're going to do this, as I mentioned before we came on live, that We want to structure this conversation today, sort of how your show is structured, which I just think is well, it's the way but my brain works. It's like in order, right? Like Dr. Loomis, you have so much experience, such a wealth of knowledge for so many years combined. And you give really great health information and tips. And like I said in the intro, just break things down so that we can digest them. And then Caryn comes in cooking a delicious meal that has something to do with the subject of the show, right? And what you're talking about. But we're not cooking on the show today. We should do that. We should definitely do that.
Yeah, we should do that. Yeah.
We can, who knows? Maybe we make that happen pre-adapt, like the night before or something.
That'd be fun,
So wait for that. But so I am gonna move in segments and subject matters that people are interested, intrigued by, care about, and things, diseases like diabetes that may be touching their lives or those that they love. So we're gonna kind of keep it organized and chunk it out, if you will. So this is interesting, Jim. You have said that type 2 diabetes is not a chronic disease, which I think almost everybody thinks that it is. Explain why it is not.
So type 2 diabetes is not a chronic disease. It's a normal physiologic response to an abnormal behavior, right? So, the root cause of type 2 diabetes, despite what people think, it's not sugar or carb, it's actually fat. Insulin is like a key that unlocks a door in our muscle cells primarily, so we can store sugar in the form of glycogen and use that for physical activity.
Yeah.
And when we get too much fat in the muscle cells, eating this kind of standard Western diet, meat, dairy, heavy, some of that fat ends up in the muscle cell and clogs up, jams up the lock from the inside so that insulin can't unlock the door. And so your sugar levels start to go up. And over time, that puts more and more strain on our pancreas, which is the organ that makes insulin. Yeah. So we start out with this insulin resistant state, prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, and then that progresses over time through to type 2 diabetes. But again, the thing is, if you think about your car, an easy way to conceptualize this, you don't park your car in the garage for a year and not drive it, but still put gas in it 5 times a day, right? You don't put 30 gallons of gas in a 15-gallon tank when you emptied it, and you certainly don't put diesel gas in your car, even in moderation, and expect it to run right if it's designed to run on regular lead. So why is it that we take better care of our cars than we do of ourselves? And the real tragic thing about type 2 diabetes, by the way, in med school, I'm old enough in med school when I had to walk 10 miles through the snow, to get to that. I didn't learn about type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes. I learned about juvenile onset diabetes and adult onset diabetes. Juvenile onset diabetes is what we now call type 1, and it's an autoimmune disease. Typically occurs in childhood, and you develop antibodies against the cells that make the insulin. They had to change the name, tragically, because now we're seeing type 2, what we used to call adult onset diabetes in 8, 9, 10-year-old kids. It's horrific.
And do any adults get type 1 as adults, or have they always had it, but they just didn't know? Like if somebody realizes that, recognizes that they have type 1 at, 19 or something.
Yeah, type 1 comes on almost overnight because you completely lose the ability to make insulin.
Yeah.
Right? So now there is another kind of insulin of diabetes, actually. And it's called there's a couple of names, type 1.5. Some people call it,
yes,
or LADA, which stands for latent autoimmune diabetes of the adult. So those patients, that's an autoimmune disease, but it's much more insidious. So it takes the pancreas doesn't quit working overnight. It can take 5 or 10 years. And so what happens is they're almost always diagnosed as type 2 diabetics, but over the course of time, we can't get their sugars under control, and they end up becoming insulin dependent because we've been treating the wrong thing, and it ends up being LADA instead. But what's interesting, and again, tragic, most patients I see, and there is increased incidence of LADA out there. Some people think it's related to dairy consumption. Actually, it's one of the things that autoimmune triggers.
Right.
But most patients that I see with type 1 or 1.5 have double diabetes. So they're
Oh my
insulin
God.
resistant. They're insulin resistant on top of their underlying the type 1, type 1 diabetic, but then you become insulin resistant because if you think about it, it doesn't matter where the insulin comes from. Your pancreas can make it or you can inject it. If you resist it, you need more insulin. Well, the more insulin you take, the higher your risk for low blood sugar. It's an anabolic steroid. It causes weight gain, right? It's expensive. So, you get these much bigger swings in your sugar. I've pre-pandemic, my friends at Mastering Diabetes, Robbie and Cyrus, had some retreats down in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
And I would go down with them as their team doctor, if you will. I saw patients coming in on 70 units of, these are type 1 diabetics, 70 units of long-acting insulin in 3 days, eating nothing but lentils and mangoes and squash, 10, 15 units. It's crazy. Right?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's insane.
Yeah.
So you're not
And
going
that's
to reverse it, but you can certainly improve it.
Improve it greatly. And that's there is the question of sugar because mangoes filled with it and they went down from 70 to 15
on mangoes,
units. Right. So let's talk a bit about the culprit, which doesn't sound to me like it's sugar. And when I go on the American Diabetes Association website, there's a lot about sugar, and I had to dig down the rabbit hole for them to talk about fat. They didn't used to, which, as you know,
right.
But fat's the culprit.
That's right. That's right. And the number one source of fat, particularly saturated fat in the Western diet, is meat and dairy. Yeah. And then you throw some French fries on top of that, ultra processed foods. But it's the pizza, the pepperoni pizza and the milkshakes and the hamburgers and, French fries, all this stuff that, again, we as human beings did not evolve to sit behind computers all day and eat Big Macs and French fries and and eat Krispy Kreme donuts. And so it's the ultra processed food and meat and dairy, which is the cause. You have to be careful with oils too, but that's not the big driver, especially for the saturated fat.
Not at all, right? Well, I want to talk about that because some olive oil is a long way from Big Macs and Krispy Kremes, right? In terms of the ultra processing, right? But Caryn, you don't use any oil in your recipes. Why not?
I don't because per tablespoon, one little tablespoon is 14 grams of fat, 100% fat, 0 fiber, and 125 calories.
Yeah.
Now, when you are about to saute some vegetables or whatever, many people, me included, used to go, right, really coat the pan with oil. And by the way, that's all oil. Those numbers we just gave out that's all oil. Doesn't matter what kind it is. But so you're heating up a pan that has 500, 600, 800 calories, do the math, however much oil's in there before you've even added any ingredients.
Right.
So you've got a pretty fat nothing there.
Right.
And
no pun intended.
No pun intended.
No
pun. So, but also, and here's the thing, like I don't like to tell people what to do. I am an educator, but I try to take the coach stance where you come to your own conclusion. And do I use oil every once in a while? Yes, every once in a while I will use it if I think that it enhances the dish or if I need it for, science purposes, like adding a little bit to the grill outside, but I know those numbers. I know it's 125 calories per tablespoon. So I'm just going to use a teeny tiny bit, right? And so that's where I think we're doing a better job now, both at teaching people to not say, hey, don't do this. No, you know what? Because if you tell somebody to not do something, that's me pretty much telling you that you're not an intelligent human being and you shouldn't even be living your own life. No, these are the facts, right? And you decide to do what you want to do. So you're really empowering people to make those decisions.
And, Caryn said, like she said, a tablespoon of oil, doesn't matter what kind, is, 14 grams of fat. For my patients with insulin resistance, I try to get their fat intake down to 30, 35 grams a day. So that is that is near impossible to do if you're putting oil in your salad dressings and cooking with the oil.
Yeah. Right. I'm glad to hear you guys say that because I'm very aware that, and Jim, I think maybe you might be the first person. I feel like we were in a restaurant somewhere and we were just talking about that you're always, I mean, you need fat but you always want to get it from the olive instead of the olive oil, the walnut
Right.
instead of the
Yeah.
walnut oil, because that brings the fiber in, which had me start to eat a lot more of the whole foods of the
Right.
fat instead of the oil. But I'm not a no oil person. And I've seen it lead to that super stringent no oil lead to orthorexia in people. And when I look at the beginning of that conversation, if you will, or for me anyway, it's the Esselstyn studies, right? That, and I'm sure maybe there are people before him, but that's where I started hearing more on the no oil. But those studies were done on diseased people, not healthy people. And so I like the way that you look at it, Caryn, where it's like, there's certainly some room for salad dressing, if you will. I'm doing what you're doing with the cooking. It's like, because we just used to douse. I mean, I must have been, I don't know, like a quarter cup of oil before we put vegetables in. I made some last night and I just go, and then it's like, I don't even know why I just put it in, because it's not really helping with the sticking, because there's so little. But that is really a lot of people's sticking point, if you will, is how do I keep stuff to not stick? And you have tricks of the trade of keeping food from sticking without oil or very, very little oil. What are they?
So I always teach people how to do a dry saute. Heat up that pan to, so it's very, very hot. Throw your vegetables on there, turn the heat down to a cooking temperature, probably medium high.
Okay.
But you always want to have your little fail safe. And that is a little ramekin or bowl or whatever of either water or vegetable broth.
Yeah.
It can be vinegars or whatever you want. Now, and then what you want to keep doing, the trick here is, now it's actually a trick to be a mindful cook as well, because you don't want to walk away from your food, right?
Right.
Because all plants, as we know, all plants have water. And when you add heat to those vegetables, they will let water moisture out, and then they easily slip and slide around the pan if you stay after it. Get your spatula, get your wooden spoon, whatever, and just keep going. Now, once they start to stick to your pan just a little bit, you don't have any of this it's not doing anything bad, you're not burning it. But once you get a little bit of browning on the bottom of that pan, first of all, that's called fond, F-O-N-D, and it's that yummy caramelization that we all love. Take a little bit of your water or broth off to the side, and just a tablespoon or so at a time, and put it in the pan and dig under that fond with your spatula. Pull that up back into the food, and wow, flavor bomb. It's huge. It's great.
Yeah.
And just keep doing that for a few minutes until your onions are little caramelized or cooked or whatever, and then just start adding in more of your ingredients as the recipe tells you to do. So it's really, seriously, Dotsie, it's just doing things that we should be doing anyway, being a mindful cook, staying on top of that food. Because if you don't, and I learned it the hard way, and this is how we learn things, you walk away and you come back and you think, oh, damn, because all that water from the plants have evaporated and you've got a black pan now. And that just kind of goes back to the oil. Well, why do we use oil? So that we can check our Instagram, walk the dog, fold the laundry,
be involved, stick with it. Stay in there.
That's right. And you just don't need it, the oil.
No, I'm excited to hear that about the fond. I mean, this was literally happening last night, and I was kind of digging, like you out and scraping it across because it tastes good. But I feel like I learned a long time ago, and I'm realizing, I think this is with just meat, so you all can answer this question. It's very carcinogenic to burn things on the grill. But is that only meat and not vegetables?
Right. So what happens is, when we grill or roast meat at a very high temperature, there's a chemical reaction between the sugars and the protein. And it's called the Maillard reaction. And that's what causes that browning. But the other thing that gets created in especially when you're grilling or roasting, there's aromatics, acrylamides is frying. So it's the aromatic hydrocarbons and polycyclic amines, things like that, which are highly carcinogenic. And it seems that the protein structure of meat is much more prone to forming those because the protein density is so much higher. You know, how much on a steak, how much of that is protein compared to a stalk of broccoli, right? There's just not a ton of protein in there to react, right? So you don't make as many of these compounds because there's not, because, you know, the surface area that's in contact, but the protein surface area on a stalk of broccoli is a lot, you know, infinitesimally smaller than the contact area, the protein contact area on a, you know, chunk of steak or, you know, something like that. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. And that makes me very excited because
Yes.
I just still eat this stuff from vegetables. I'm like, I don't know if this is supposed to be good for me,
No,
but
it's good. It's good.
It's fine.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
And the other thing about the oils too, by the way, you have to be careful with is it's a concept called smoke points. So each oil has a smoke point, and beyond that, it actually gets transformed chemically into trans fats. And trans fats are actually much worse for heart disease risk than even, you know, saturated fat.
Okay.
So things like olive oil have a relatively low smoke point, so they're fine for sautéing, but you don't want to, you know, you don't want to fry things in it. So that's the other thing to be cognizant of is if you decide to use some oil, be sure you're using an oil that matches with the smoke point that matches the temperature you're going to be cooking at. So
Okay,
for example, avocado oil is a much higher smoke point than olive oil.
That's what I was going to ask. And coconut, isn't that one?
Coconut's the worst. Coconut's really the worst because that's all saturated fat. Actually.
It is the worst, but I'm just talking about the smoke point. Like it's a very high
it's got a pretty low smoke point.
It's pretty low.
Low.
Low
Yeah.
smoke point.
Okay, so avocado oil is what you always suggest for the high.
Right.
Okay.
And you know what? If you're going to use it, just get one of those little sprays, you know, so that you're not
right.
You could just spray it.
Get a little mister thing you can put the oil in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that keeps it that keeps it low.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, than pouring it in. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's a smarter way. Let me digress out of health for just a second, or food health and food pans. I'm using cast iron. We know that Teflon will kill you. And I don't know about the different non-stick and the chemicals that are on those so that your food doesn't stick at all. But I also know as an athlete that too much iron we can oxidize in our body. When athletes come to me and say, oh, well, I don't know, I think I'm not going to have, you know, high iron or plant-based diet, or, you know, the first thing I say is go have your iron checked. First of all, don't just assume that you had low iron, because I had higher iron when I went plant-based than when I was meat-based. So it's certainly not an always, but it's never smart to just start taking iron if you haven't gone to get your iron done and know that you are low. So same with the skillet, right? I mean, it's iron, and how long do they last? Are they good for you? Can that iron from your skillet oxidize in our bodies?
From what I've understood, and I have not done a deep dive, I don't know if you know too much about this, but you don't really take in that much iron from cast iron.
That leaches out.
Yeah.
Because the iron, I mean, it takes a lot of energy if we go to liberate the iron molecules from the skillet, right? Because it's a metal, right? And so
it's not a good source of iron.
It's not a concern if you've got high iron, or if you're worried about high iron. And really, the only people that need to worry about high iron are people that have a genetic disorder called hemochromatosis. It's fairly common though.
Right.
It's a disorder of iron metabolism, and it causes the iron to store in the liver, which can cause inflammation and problems down the road. But most people. Now, that being said, we do know that the overconsumption of heme iron, which is so iron comes in two forms dietary wise. There's heme iron and non-heme iron. So heme iron is iron bound hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein in our blood that carries oxygen. So basically, when we eat a piece of meat, we're eating some of that dead animal's blood, right, with it, which is really disgusting when you realize that, right? But that's where the heme iron comes from. Well, heme iron is highly pro-oxidant, highly inflammatory. It's probably one of the reasons that red meat has such a high association with colon cancer because of the excess heme iron. And we'll absorb as much heme iron as we take. Now, non-heme iron, which is what's found in plants, is harder for our bodies to absorb, which is why it can be kind of a nutrient of pseudo concern on a plant-based diet. It doesn't need to be. it is harder for our bodies to absorb. However, if you co-ingest a source of vitamin C with a source of plant-based iron like beans and legumes and spinach, things like that, you'll absorb as much, if not more. But it's also self-regulating. So when your iron stores are deplete, you'll stop absorbing. So you won't over-absorb the non-heme iron like you can with the heme iron.
Oh, smart body. Okay.
Yeah, no, exactly, right.
Mm-hmm.
So again, people that, I mean, I've seen it in junk food vegans, iron deficiency, but if you're eating a well-balanced whole food plant-based diet, where you're using citrus and bell peppers and all that stuff, you're eating a lot of fruit, and it's just not something you have to worry about.
So put lemon in your hummus.
Right,
That's
there you go. It's a perfect example.
Perfect,
right?
which is my favorite hummus. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'll eat lemon anything. All right, let's move to fiber.
Oh,
Only
okay.
5% of people I read in the US meet the Institute of Medicine's recommended daily target of 25 grams for women and 38 grams for men, which you think is low. Sounds low to me now that I've been on a whole food plant-based diet for a long time.
Yes.
Why is fiber so important? And because no one's focused on it, right? Everyone's focused on protein. Why do we need to flip the switch and focus on fiber?
So fiber does a ton of things. And so there's two broad categories of fiber. There's soluble fiber, which absorbs water and kind of turns into a jelly, like a gel-like mass, if you will. And then there's insoluble fiber, which kind of passes through intact. So both have health benefits. They can, regular bowel movements, not being constipated, decreasing your risk for hemorrhoids, things like that. But also markedly decrease risk for colon cancer. But most important, what we're understanding now is the role that fiber plays as a prebiotic to feed a healthy gut microbiome. But it does a lot of other stuff. It attenuates sugar. So when this gets back, you kind of alluded to this earlier about the mangoes. It's the package the mangoes come in, right? So mango juice doesn't have fiber. That sugar is absorbed very quickly and spikes our insulin. A mango, though, the sugar in the mango is embedded in the mango and along with fiber. So it's fiber. Fiber actually slows the progression through our digestive tract of food. So that sugar is absorbed much more slowly. And in fact, the way it does that is it activates the GLP-1 receptor, which is the same thing that Wegovy does. So fiber is actually nature's Wegovy, right? I mean, you said earlier, nature's an amazing thing, and so fiber plays a ton of role. So cancer risk, heart disease risk, gut microbiome, which is that's a whole talk in and of itself. And you're right. I would say I usually recommend 40 to 50 grams of fiber a day. But it's back to this ultra processed food. We take food apart, we throw out the fiber, we reassemble it, and it's terrible.
If somebody's starting out, let's say they're only getting the 25 for women, or maybe they're getting less, maybe they're getting 15 or something.
Yeah, that's about average.
Yeah. That's so low. Because I think I'm upwards of 80. Yeah. I've counted it before as I got, it's and
that's right. Yeah, same.
I have no problem, as you probably don't either, right, with any sort of digestive bloating, gas, but so many people do when they start out. Right. My mom being one of them, right? I mean, and so I really had to take her through the bean tutorial. It's like, don't start with kidney beans. And I said to her, start with the beans that when you smush them, they smush. Yeah. Right. It's hard to, it's kidney beans kind of like, resist the lentil bean, soybeans. They just kind of, so Caryn, how do you recommend that people start to sneak, the fiber into their recipes, into their diet in a way that won't have them doubled over after eating, right? And so they can ease their way into putting a lot more fiber in their diet.
Betsy, I like you so much. I'm so going to geek out about this. This is one of my favorite topics.
Our audience is pretty hip to this stuff. So you can go big.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I like to say the fiber is my favorite F word. Sometimes
your second favorite F word, depending on how I'm behaving.
Potty mouth people.
True story.
My sister.
So this is kind of a big thing to unpack, but Reader's Digest version, of course. So you are correct when you were talking with your mom about you want to go with a smaller bean or a smushed bean. It's that smushes easily, yes, because then you know that it's gonna smush in your stomach easier and you won't bloat so much. And I know that bloating is also another, we can talk about that. But what I like to do is I've created this little kind of tutorial. It's called the fiber formula. And so I talk with people and I say, okay, listen, we need to train your gut. We need to train your body to accept and break down this fiber. You can't do it in one night. So what I say, okay, just get 10 grams of fiber every single day for 1 week, just 10 grams. And so, people come back and they're like, oh my gosh, it's so easy. I say, yes, you're right. It is easy, but I'm putting you on the people mover first. We're not going up the mountain yet. Okay. I just want you to start this habit of counting your fiber. You don't need to count your steps. You don't need to count your calories, your fat, your carb, your points, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just fiber. Okay.
Wow.
This is a month-long process. Your second week, I want you to get 20 grams of fiber every single day. And most-ish people are like, okay, that was doable. Then third week, you know where I'm going with this, 30 grams, fourth week, 40 grams. And of course, then I have already tricked them and I say, let's just go another 2 weeks and see if we can get up to 60. That's another story. But what you're doing is is we're training, because I'm sure you guys know nothing about training, right? Yeah. We're training your gut. And I tell people, listen, if you have not been to the gym ever, or in like 2 weeks, and you have just done one hell of a workout and you wake up the next day and you're so sore, no, you're not saying, oh, I shouldn't go to the gym anymore. That's not good for me. No, you say, yeah, I worked out. I'm getting back on the horse, right? Now, but when people eat too many beans or raw vegetables, anything that's really hard for your body to break down, they start using that first F word on me because they say, oh, I can't do this. I can't eat these healthy foods because my body doesn't like it. Well, no, not right now. It doesn't. You need to train yourself. So when we start adding more fiber in, yes, we start using those smaller beans with a thin skin and that are very mushy, if you will. So the lentils, black beans, things like that. And then also I don't start people on raw vegetables because that again can be pretty tough to break down, right? So a light steam on the vegetables. And then also with the beans, you don't have to go straight to the bean and eat it. You can make black bean burgers. You can make hummus. You can make these things that are almost, really pre-digested. So your body's not doing really as much work as it will be able to do later.
I love how you think about this and how you present this to people.
Right.
Thank you.
It's the idea that you wouldn't, if you decided you wanted to run a marathon, you wouldn't go run 20 miles the first day, right? You would run a couple miles. So that's the fiber formula. This is all actually what's happening is it's gut microbiome. The reason people get all this disrupted, this gas and bloating and such is because they don't have enough of the right bacteria to digest the sugars and the fiber in the beans. And so you've got to stop feeding those gut bacteria, fat and sugar and salt and all that, and start feeding them healthier foods. But there's a process to kind of redevelop or train, if you will, your gut microbiome.
Have you ever felt trapped in a cycle of stress and sleepless nights? I know I have. But since I've added Magnesium Breakthrough to my nightly routine, no joke, I've been able to quiet my mind, fall asleep fast, and stay asleep longer. And what sets this supplement apart is that while other magnesium supplements, and certainly all the other ones I've tried, and I've been taking magnesium for years, while all the other ones only give you 1 to 2 forms of magnesium, Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms. So, I've never even heard of this. So it will not only help you fall asleep, but it will keep you regular and focus your mind, plus the many, many other things that magnesium does, which you've probably heard me talk about on this podcast, because as I said before, I've been taking magnesium for years and it's really, really helped me. But I love this magnesium because it contains all 7 forms of the supplement, and it's vegan, gluten-free, and soy-free. And also super important to me because, as we know, supplements aren't regulated. They don't contain always what they say they contain, but Magnesium Breakthrough has received a good manufacturing practice certification through third-party inspections, so you can trust by optimizers. So Get this all-natural, full-spectrum magnesium supplement by going to buyoptimizers.com/switch4good and use promo code switch4good during checkout to save 10%.
We're going to stick on training for a second because I want to talk about salt.
Okay.
There's also the no salt craze in our whole food plant-based
Yes.
movement, if you will, sort of like the no oil. It's like no salt, no salt, no salt, which is fine if you sit on the couch all day. But I recently, super short little story, was with a couple who've been whole food plant-based for about 4 or 5 years. And the guy ran his first marathon, and he now wants to do an Ironman, right? Which will take him all day because he's just kind of getting into it. So that is a long time. And previous to him telling me that, they were talking about that there's no salt in their house. And they're also in their mid-20s. So, we're not, it's not a lifetime of salt in their, in their 80s, and they're having some issues. So I said, okay, whoa. Like, let's talk about salt, what an electrolyte is. It's one of the electrolytes, how important it is, and that it's literally an electric current for your muscles to work. Like you will make it through, I don't know, what do you think? Like maybe an hour of the bike before you just fall over in an Ironman, especially if it's hot. So I sent him all the studies on Google Scholar with salt and athletes, but it's important to unpack, because there are, I think, elite athletes, as he'll realize real quick that he needs salt and how much. But there's a lot of people, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, that are just healthy, active people, right? They're out there, and in summertime is here. It's not super here in Southern California. We're still in June gloom, but a lot of places it's hot, it's humid, they're sweating. And if you're on a no salt diet and you are moving your body, you're going to have some problems. So how much salt? How should we rethink salt if you are active?
That's a great question. And so first of all, for the normal person, just everyday person who's normally kind of active, we actually need very little salt to survive. Like 500 milligrams, right? Someone who is healthy, normal blood pressure, normal heart function, 2,500 is probably okay. You're not going to get in much trouble after that. There is some evidence that salt intakes beyond that can create inflammation and can become problematic. But you're right. I mean, for someone who's very athletic, especially in a warm climate, where you're sweating out salt, you do need to replenish that. What's interesting, though, and I've certainly experienced this in my training, because I did Lake Placid Ironman. It was in July 28th. And so most of my training, my hard training, was June, July in Washington, D.C., where I go on these 90-mile bike rides, and a heat index would be 110 by the time I got done. But what's interesting is as athletes acclimate to heat, your body actually will learn to hold on to much more salt. So if you measure the salt content of sweat at the beginning, when someone just starts training in the heat versus 3 months later, you're losing significantly less salt at the end. So our bodies help us in some ways to hold on to that salt, because we do need it for muscle function, like you said, but what I do at home, I used a little bit of salt, finishing salt for flavor. I used an electrolytes. I used a product, Tailwind, which it had electrolytes in it in my training. So it is important, and I incorporated it into my fuel just with an electrolyte solution when I was training hard. For most people, probably don't need to do that, but for someone who's training hard, especially out in the hot weather, and especially if you're not acclimated to the heat, it's much more important, because your salt losses will go way up, and then you end up with muscle cramps and on and on and on. It's bad news.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. I think it's important for people to hear that are really active and are in a hot climate. What about folks, Caryn, that are diseased, that are really watching their salt content. I've noticed, I don't know, maybe it's just in the last year or something, it is absolutely absurd how much salt is in restaurant food. I like salt. I mean, I love that flavor like most people, but I have been turned off by, it's like, if it's too much salt for me, that's a lot of salt. Cause it's just
Same, actually,
insane,
yeah.
right? So we're getting so addicted to that flavor. How do you teach people to make their dishes flavorful without salt or super, super low salt?
Yeah, so I mean, I use salt in my cooking, and I get some people who, write me or take classes, and you shouldn't be using any salt. And you know what? Then go to the next person. Sorry, we're not everybody for everybody. So, but I,
No, but wait.
The end.
You do say. Okay, sorry.
Stop it.
Sorry.
So, I, to God, he just doesn't shut up sometimes. So I do use it, but I use it in the way that I believe it is intended. It helps flavors bloom. So I use it during the cooking process. I don't, and I know Jim does use some finishing salt on his. I don't do that. I use and it doesn't, not one's better than the other. It doesn't matter. It's not that, but I use it just to enhance the flavors. And, I use a pinch, and a pinch is like an eighth of a teaspoon, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little, whatever, doesn't matter. And then I taste my food, right? So I am not a salt-free person. Personally, I think that's very, very bland. And I don't think that in today's age, with all these highly processed foods, I don't even think that we should be telling people to not salt anything, because I want them to find flavorful plant-based foods, so if you're getting a little bit more salt, but you're eating this beautiful, colorful dish of plants, fine. It's better than going down to, well, I'm not going to drop any names because I don't want to give any free advertising, but to the nearest fast food place, or, to prepackaged goods.
Yeah.
So I don't want to scare people away and be like, no, we're not doing any salt. No, I'm going to teach you how I think that maybe you'll enjoy it still, but we're not using too much of it.
And the other interesting thing about that, what I was going to say though, and what you say is sometimes, you do, like, it's okay if you don't want to use salt, fine.
Yeah.
But if you elect to do it, here's a little bit. So, just again, what you were saying. Yeah. But our taste buds, what's interesting is this is what's happened to you, because it happened to me too. When I got healthier and started eating more plant-based foods, because I wasn't eating all the fast food and the packaged goods and all that, my salt intake went way down. And at first, the food tasted really bland, right? Well, now your taste buds will readjust, right? And now, if I go, like, sometimes even like bread at a restaurant, it tastes like ultra salty to me, because you become so sensitive to the salt that when you take it away. That a little bit of salt goes a really long way now, which is good, right? So you don't have those salt cravings kind of things.
And I also think that we have to educate ourselves on what else is out there besides salt. So dill is a great, very punchy herb, right? Yeah. So that will help you boost your flavors. And then adding lemon to the end of a dish. So it does not give it a lemony flavor if you don't add too much, but it just brightens up the dish. And if you have, I like to batch cook, because I don't like to cook every day. So I'll have the leftovers, but I won't add more salt, because sometimes those flavors do get muted after a day or so. Just add a little bit of lemon to the, and then mix it in the dish. And it really, again, just like livens up the flavors. So,
is that because the acid?
The acid does. Yeah.
The
that's what just brightens everything up.
Mechanism. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is so true. And limes too, not as much as lemon, but I've been using them and they seem to brighten things up as well.
Citrus. Sure.
That's
sure.
Citrus,
kind
right?
of,
You can use
okay.
orange too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Going back to the to the microbiome and the gut and brain connection, which is just, if there's anything that's newer in what we talk about as far as plant-based eating, it's that the exciting connection, right, that we've learned in the last, I don't know, Jim, 20 years, 15 years. It certainly wasn't 60 years ago that anyone talked about. And it's so exciting because I like control, and it puts me in the driver's seat. It's like, oh my gosh, I have a lot of control over the health of this from the health of this and what I put in there. What is that? Our microbiome is hugely important, and lots of folks that listen to the show have heard a healthy dose of microbiome talk from having the different gastroenterologists on that we have. But if we are wanting to have more clarity, better mental health, even just feeling less blue, maybe when we wake up, or those random days where you just feel like you're feeling blue and you want to do something healthy that's going to put you in the driver's seat. Is there something that you lean into to just go, okay, I'm just going to have a shot of health to my gut microbiome? And I want to bring Caryn into this too, right? Like, as far as like, are there just some foods that it's just like, just do this right now, and it's going to help that connection, short-term and long-term, of course?
So what's interesting is that, we now know this is the gut-brain axis, and there's different components of that. Some of it has to do with vagal nerve and such, but there's a direct component, particularly around mood. Many people, when they get depressed or feel anxious, they go see their doctor, and the doctor gives them a prescription for some Prozac or some Celexa or Lexapro. And that's a class of medicines called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So that raises serotonin levels in our brain, and serotonin makes us happy. What turns out, what we've discovered is that the precursors to those serotonin molecules aren't made by our brain. They're actually made by our gut microbiome. And so one of the positive side effects for many people when they adapt a whole food plant-based diet and reset their gut microbiome, their mood improves. They're less anxious. They're sleeping better because now they've got the right bacteria, if you will, right? The other thing, there's an association, there's some evidence that depression in particular has kind of a low-grade inflammatory component. And so once again, when we're eating a whole food plant-based diet, and we boost our ability to fight inflammation, and we do that two ways. So one are dietary antioxidants, so eating the rainbow. And then the other is decreasing the amount of omega-6 fatty acids in your diet and increasing the amount of omega-3. So it's getting rid of the meat and dairy and a lot of the oils, because oils, the other problem with oils, just to go back to that for a second, most of those have a pretty high omega-6, omega-3 ratio. So what we're looking for is probably 2 to 1, maybe 3 to 1. Olive oil is 13 to 2. So, it's still pretty high. And so when we bring that back into balance by eating, chia seeds and flax seeds and pumpkin seeds and walnuts, and getting rid of all the bad omega oils and all that, plus feed a healthy gut microbiome, in general, everything, our mood improves. The acutely, I think you already kind of mentioned the answer there, and that's exercise. Exercise has been shown to be way more effective than drugs in both anxiety and depression. So for me, because I tend to eat a pretty healthy diet 99% of the time. I think when I'm feeling that low, I'm going out for a long walk or a run or hitting the pool or hitting the gym, that always helps perk me back up.
That's the cheat sheet right there.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what? I never thought about that, but that's true. It is a cheat sheet. You're absolutely right. I never thought about that. I mean, he'll be in a bad mood every once in a while. I'll say, get out, go run or something. I'm a big rower. And if I'm just kind of in a bitchy mood or whatever, I know that I need to move. So I will hit that rower real hard and just drain myself. And then I'm just the lovely person that I am every day.
But there's a theme.
Nothing
here,
from
right?
you, Jim. Right.
So there's a theme here that people I hope are picking up here. In medicine today, we practice health reductionism, right? Mm-hmm. We treat people's mood differently than we treat their blood pressure, differently than we treat their cholesterol, differently than we treat their cancer risk, differently than we treat their blood sugars. But what's the root cause of all of those problems? 90% plus of the cause is the food that goes in our mouth, how much we move, how much we stress, how much we sleep, and what environmental toxins we expose ourselves to, primarily tobacco and alcohol, though I think there is increasing concern about things like pesticides and herbicides and forever chemicals and hormones and things like that in our food. So when we flip that model upside down, and focus on the food and the movement and the sleep and the stress and minimizing these risky exposures, it's the same conversation, whether we're talking about diabetes or depression or doesn't matter.
Cancer.
Yeah, breast cancer, right? It's the same
All the same.
thing. And people, people don't get that sometimes, right? And it's but when it clicks, people are like, oh wow, that makes sense, right? Because it's root cause. And that's what lifestyle medicine is, really. It's focusing on those things.
Caryn, I want you to tell us about Chop and Stop to get the most nutrition out of some garlic and
hack and
onions.
hold, chop and stuff. Yeah. So that's there is a very, very powerful chemical reaction that happens when you cut a lot of cruciferous vegetables, broccoli being probably the most concentrated. This chemical reaction is called sulforaphane, and it's a chemical that's made through a chemical reaction. When you chop your broccoli, cruciferous vegetables, we're just going to say broccoli, and you wait about 40-45 minutes, and this sulforaphane is created. Now that comes from chopping or cutting the cell wall of the broccoli.
Okay.
And in the broccoli, you're going to find an enzyme called myrosinase. And then you're also going to find, so cofactor is blue, I can never say it. Yeah, so there's a cofactor and an enzyme that come together after about 45 minutes, and sulforaphane is created. Okay, so, and that's what you want to do if you're going to heat up your broccoli in any way. If you're going to steam it, if you're going to roast it, if you're going to put it on the grill, it doesn't matter, okay? Now,
Because the cooking deactivates the myrosinase.
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 Yes, yes. So, but if you're going to eat it raw, you don't need to prep that or anything. You're just going to eat it because you're breaking down the cell walls with your teeth. And you're not heating it. It's just going in your body, and it's going to sit in your body for like 40-45 minutes, maybe a couple hours. And that sulforaphane is made. And that is a huge cancer fighter. Off the charts, huge. Now, please also eat those stalks, eat those broccoli stalks, because it's just more concentrated than a floret, right? So you're going to find more sulforaphane created from the stalks. Right. I know they're not super yummy. Just chop them up if you want to. But actually even more sulforaphane is made in broccoli sprouts. And usually we don't heat up sprouts, right? Because they're so delicate. So you just eat them however you're going to eat them in a wrap or whatever.
It's like 100 times more, right? Something
it's like maybe even more than that. But my gosh, broccoli sprouts. And I'm not the biggest fan of sprouts because it's a texture issue. But I'm forcing myself to a little bit more, just because really it's just such a powerhouse. And I've had cancer a couple of times. So, there's no reason I shouldn't be eating them. No reason anybody shouldn't be eating them.
Right. It's interesting because these compounds like the sulforaphane are these plants' natural defense mechanism to protect themselves from getting a viral infection, fungal infection, or whatever, when their cell walls get damaged. So that's why you have to damage the cell wall to make the compound, because the plant is trying to protect itself. It's been damaged and it's trying to protect itself. And there's another vegetable that the same thing. There's another one called allicin, which is made in onions. And it's the same, but different times for that, right?
Yeah. So the allium family does something similar to the cruciferous family. And if you chop and stop or hack and hold, whatever you want to do, cut your onions, shallots, garlic,
right?
Garlic. Yeah. For about, let it sit, cut them, kind of work on your recipe, do whatever you're doing, and let it sit for about 15 minutes or so. Then that allicin, ALICIN, by the way, is created. And that too is a big cancer fighter. Now that has a bell-shaped curve in that you're at that 15-minute mark, and that is created, that allicin is created. That's when you want to start using your food in a recipe. And then it does kind of wane from there. And that's okay. Like if you think, oh shoot, I didn't pre-cut my, garlic or whatever. It's okay. We're both just talking about getting the biggest nutrition bang for your buck. It's still garlic, it's still awesome.
There's still other health benefits too, right?
There are other benefits
Right.
to it, yeah. But if you really are just really drilling down and trying to get the most from your food, then you want to wait about 15 minutes for the allium family.
Right.
And then for the cruciferous, interesting thing about the cruciferous vegetables and sulforaphane. Now, when you cut up, like if you're bringing your broccoli home and you know you're going to put it in a soup or whatever, so you can bring it home, chop it up, and then put it into a container or whatever, and put it in the fridge. There's no bell-shaped curve. That sulforaphane is going to hang out and be in that food, be in that broccoli, whatever, until you use it. I don't care if it's in 3 weeks, probably not 3 weeks, but you understand what I'm saying.
But not the onion,
No.
right?
But not the onion.
Right.
The onion the onion has a shelf life. The sulforaphane, the broccoli does not.
Dr. Christy Funk taught me, because like everyone, I love air fried anything, and did do air fried broccoli and Brussels sprouts. I don't know, maybe I just love them.
Oh, I love your fried.
Yeah.
I know. I
love
think you're the first person I knew that had an air fryer, which was, I don't know,
Yeah.
6 to 7 years ago or something like that. We were talking about
right.
it, but she said, just then take it out of the air fryer, and you have the little bit that you've cut up on the side into teeny tiny bits, and just sprinkle them on top.
Right.
Because I
So
was like,
that's
oh no, I can't cook my broccoli anymore to get the sulforaphane.
So that's interesting. And thank you for saying that. Yeah, she number one, she's right. And she's awesome because she's Christy Funk. But
Totally.
little girl crushing her. But did that come through?
It did.
But-
It did. I do too. It's okay. We can
Okay.
talk
Okay,
about that
good,
later.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So what she's saying is, the enzyme myrosinase is destroyed in heat. Okay. And when
Okay, right. I
and
remember this.
here we are. Yeah. So this is tying it all together. So the myrosinase is destroyed in heat. So what you want to do is it's deactivated. So when you cut it up and let it sit, and the myrosinase then comes together with the cofactor and sulforaphane is made, then you have a stable product, a stable food. You can heat it up all day long and you will not kill the sulforaphane. Okay.
Okay.
But if you bring your broccoli home and you're like, I'm going to make the soup right now, and you don't wait, okay, and you heat up the broccoli, and you've killed that enzyme, the right myrosinase. Now you can get that back. You can reactivate the whole process and still get your sulforaphane if you have a little bit of saved, if you will, myrosinase in the form of cut broccoli off to the side. Okay. Now, if you don't, because you're like, I just cut everything up and I've got too much on my mind right now to think about this. If you have a little bit of mustard powder in your spice drawer, because mustard
is a cruciferous
vegetable.
Oh, wow.
So what companies do is they take mustard seeds, so they haven't added any heat, take the mustard seed, grind it up, and it's mustard powder as we know it. You can add a little bit of mustard powder to that cooked broccoli soup that you're making, and you will then have sulforaphane.
So using the chopped broccoli like you were doing is the same concept, right? And the other place this is important, by the way, is
frozen.
So frozen broccoli's good. I mean, most frozen people, it gets a bad rep, but a lot of frozen food is actually as healthy, if not healthier, than some fresh produce, because it was frozen right off the field,
fresh,
as opposed to getting on a truck, right?
Right.
So, but broccoli, frozen broccoli, before they freeze it, they blanch it, so they've deactivated. People they think it's raw broccoli, but it's actually been blanched. So you have to use the mustard powder technique on frozen broccoli, and when you use it, because even if you cut it, because it's already been heated once, the myrosinase has been deactivated. So
Yes.
Well,
another
mustard
little
powder is
trick.
delicious, so that is a wonderful solution.
Yeah,
And very, very little is needed. I mean, it's just something 1/8 of a teaspoon or something. It's very, very small. Yeah.
So I want to go under a category of foods that seem to be called anti-nutrients and whatever.
Yeah.
Right. We're going to
right. We're laughing because, we have shows on all of these. We just did a show on it. Is that up yet? It's up.
It was last week. Yeah.
So
yes. And people can just, I'm assuming, just put in the search your all show, and then what subject matter you're looking for, and YouTube's real smart, and that's going to pop up. So everything that we've kind of talked about here, people want to go deeper and see you cook. I mean, they're gonna be going, no doubt, to watch this unfold. But Jim, tell us about these things called lectins and phthalates. There's been so much, I don't know, discussion, if you will. I that's using a nice term, about how bad they are. Is this correct? And what are the downsides and then upsides of these foods?
So what you're talking about are phytates and lectins, mainly found. They're found in a lot of foods, but you find them a lot in legumes, have pretty high concentration. So there's a doctor named Dr. Stephen Gundry who wrote a book called The Plant Paradox, which is probably not based in the soundest science that's out there, right? So it is true that lectins and phytates occur in beans. It's also true.
I'm sorry, I said phthalates, didn't I? Okay, let's just clear that up for everyone. Yeah, phytates.
Phytic acid, I think, is the
okay.
Yeah. So it is also true that if we take in too many lectins and phytates, that they block the absorption of minerals, mainly calcium. So that's why they're called anti-nutrients. However, when you cook a bean, you reduce the phytate and lectin levels down by like 90 something %, right? And, I don't know about you, but if you try to eat a raw black bean, dried bean, you're going to break a tooth, right? So when we cook the foods, the lectins and phytates go away. And there are, in fact, some health benefits with both of those outside of, just in general. And, if you look at the blue zones, right? The areas of the world, communities around the world that have the longest lived lives in the history, right? More 100-year-olds than anybody else. If you do a Venn diagram, right, of what they all have in common, it's things like they're physically active and they don't smoke. Legumes is their primary source of protein. They have spiritual connections. So you would think if somehow beans were this anti-nutrient, this terrible thing, that the longest lived people in the world wouldn't be consuming them as their primary source of protein. So it's just, frankly, it's just nonsense. I think And by the way, so for the show, if you go to docandchef.com, it has all the shows listed. But every show I actually write a 4 to 5 page scientific blog post. There's a link in the show notes. So if people want to do a deeper dive into the science of these anti-nutrients, you can read the blog. It's in the show notes on our show.
Okay, good. I know people are going to want to go deeper. I think that they are going to really want to go deeper because we are just almost out of time. And I mean, that lasted like 5 minutes for me. I don't know about the listeners, but I feel like it was so short. And I know, and Alexandra was just crushed that the computer was misbehaving. So we'd love to have you guys back on and do a round 2 because there's so much more that we can dive into. But this was just, it was incredible teaser for our audience. So for next time.
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dotsy. This was fun.